Prom night. If you're not back by midnight, you won't be coming home.
Hello and welcome to another bad movie review. This time we're looking at the original Prom Night from 1980. Rated R, comes in about an hour and a half. This film was directed by Paul Lynch, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Leslie Nielsen, Casey Stevens, Anne-Marie Martin, who was going under the name Eddie Benton at the time, as well as Michael Tuff and David Mucci, as well as several others. There are a lot of recognizable faces in here from various other films. Jamie Lee Curtis, of course, being the most prominent, and this was one of the first 3 films she did after Halloween, all of which were horror movies. The Fog came out earlier that year in 1980, then Prom Night, then Terror Train. She did 2 TV appearances before that are known, and that was Love Boat and Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. So her filming really jumped up after Halloween. Doing those 2 TV guest appearances were really kind of probably pre-contracted before the success of Halloween was registered, and then she did these 3 horror films. Now in this one she plays Kimberly Hammond, whose sister Robin is killed. Now how did Robin die? Well, some kids were playing in an abandoned building. Robin wanted to play with them, but they didn't really want to play with her, and they start kind of bullying her. They had been playing a game called Killer, and the killer's gonna get you, so you go and hide like hide and seek, and when the killer finds you, you join with the killer, and then it becomes killers looking for people, and eventually you end up with a crowd looking for the remaining people hiding. Well, this girl Robin accidentally screws the game up, and they start to kind of tease her, and then she plummets to her demise. But somebody witnessed the crime, and 6 years later they plan their revenge on Prom Night. There was a guy that was convicted of the killing, a guy named Leonard, who we only see briefly at the beginning of the movie. Now with Prom Night approaching, we learn that Leonard has escaped the mental institution he was in because he had fled from the police originally and got set on fire somehow, and then he was horribly scarred. So there's a suspect for you. There's also the suspect of the high school janitor, who's kind of weird and kooky, and of course you've got Kimberly, who is played by Jamie Lee Curtis, who is the older sister of Robin, and she also has a younger brother named Alex. So there are multiple people that could be the killer here, including Leslie Nielsen, who was not only the principal of the school but also the dad of the Hammond kid. Now we start to see things kind of kick off with obscene phone calls, and these calls are directed at the 4 kids that were there when Robin died, and that's Jude, Kelly, Nick, and Wendy. Wendy's kind of the ringleader. Now Jude, played by Joy Thompson, gets a call, and it's kind of vague, but she just thinks it's a pervy weirdo, so it gets dismissed pretty quickly. And then Kelly gets a phone call as well. Kelly's played by Mary Beth Rubens. Now Nick misses his phone call because his dad, who is Lieutenant McBride, a local police officer investigating the escape of Leonard, we'll get to that in a second, is trying to hurry him along to get going to school because he's got to go to work. Now, since Leonard apparently has escaped the mental institution, Lieutenant McBride doesn't want anyone to know. He wants to keep that a secret so as not to freak out the public, so he doesn't bother to warn anybody because he doesn't know these kids actually did it. Now, Wendy also gets a phone call, and it does disturb her a little bit, and she is, as I said, played by Anne-Marie Martin, who is probably best known for being in the TV series Sledgehammer or being Michael Crichton's wife. She also wrote Twister, which was an adaptation of a Michael Crichton story, and she was in the TV movie Doctor Strange as well as a lot of other TV appearances, including The Young Ones, which really surprised me, and The Powers of Matthew Starr. But she was also briefly in an uncredited role in Halloween 2 and Savage Harvest. So we've got a lot of people with some pretty good credentials in this film. Now we find out Leonard was in the area and that he stopped at the abandoned building where the kids had been playing when the tragedy occurred, which makes everyone think that he was there and he's still in the area. Now he had taken a nurse hostage and they find her body, so it did count that as a kill even though we don't see the actual killing happen. Now we get a lot of these school dynamics at this point. Wendy and Kimberly don't like each other. Kimberly doesn't know that Wendy helped kill her sister, so so she's not real upset about that. It's the fact that Nick seems to like Kimberly more than he likes Wendy, and Wendy is pretty jealous of that fact. And then we've got this guy Lou, who's kind of the local high school tough. He starts a fight by trying to come on to Kimberly in the lunch line. It ends up with Lou fighting with Kimberly's brother, Alex, in the lunchroom. Now, interestingly, there is a goof here because in that scene, Jamie Lee Curtis accidentally calls Alex by the actor's name, Michael, and then corrects it, but they didn't cut it out of the audio. So you hear her yell Michael and then Alex several times. And I think a lot of people probably thought that was inserted as a joke for Michael Myers, but it's actually Michael Tuff's name that she's saying. She's saying the actor's name instead of his character's name, which she quickly corrects. Now, because of this fight, Lou gets suspended. That doesn't stop him from showing up at prom, though, but it does add to the suspect list of who the killer could be. So Wendy recruits Lou to help get even against Kimberly and Nick for not abiding by her mean girl demands. And from there, things kind of get ugly. So the prom theme is disco madness, because why not? And there's a lot of disco in the last half of the film. And it really takes about half the film to get going. Everything is slow build up. So this is a very slow burn movie. It's not a real slasher movie where there's just indiscriminate killing on the regular. This has actually got quite a lot of plot build up to establish who everybody is and kind of allude to motivations that may make some of them the killer. We don't know about Nick, but the three girls that were involved in the accident that resulted in Robin's death have their yearbook photos put in their lockers with a piece of broken mirror in it. So that's a little disturbing, but they don't really think too much of it other than that it's kind of weird. Now, the first real victim ends up being Kelly, who gives us our only plot point in the film and also our taillights, because despite this being a horror film, very little nudity in it. Very, very little. But she refuses to put out, and it ends up with her boyfriend leaving and the killer coming in. The second victim is another one of the women and her date, who are fooling around in a van after smoking a joint and having coitus. So that post-coitus bliss is ruined and a night to remember for the rest of their lives, which is about 5 minutes. The third female victim is in the bathroom and asks the killer for mascara, which seemingly indicates something, but does it really? And things go crazy. She manages to dodge an axe and then runs off. There's a big chase sequence. We find out what happened to Leonard and the groundskeeper and whether or not they're the killer. And the final attack on Nick happens in the last few minutes of the movie. There is a fight and the killer is revealed. Now, we don't know if the killer actually dies, so it didn't count that body in the body count. So this one comes in at a remarkably low body count of 7, and so one of them is the nurse that was killed off screen without really any indication of who she was or why or anything like that. We just see the body, but it's technically a kill in a way, so I counted it. But it's hard to say if the killer actually died. It seems to indicate that he did, but there's enough vagueness there, I think, that could have been a sequel set up. But the abruptness of the ending really doesn't do the movie justice. It's really needed to indicate what ultimately happens to Nick. So it's a bit unsatisfying of an ending. There are a few things that kind of annoyed me through the film. It is a bit slow. The soundtrack is very dated. Definitely not the worst I've ever heard for a horror film. As far as that goes, it was a good movie. Surprisingly entertaining for being low budget. Like I said, with only one instant of plot points and one taillight, it is a little bit of a disappointment on the nudity front. There are a couple of times when the boom mic drops down too, or is visible in the shot, which I thought was pretty funny, and I always find those very entertaining. They're kind of like Easter eggs for bad movie fans. Now, this was directed by Paul Lynch, who has a pretty decent array of credits, from episodes of Xena Warrior Princess to a couple episodes of Sliders, and various TV movies and TV series over the years, including some Star Trek Deep Space Nine and various other things. But I have to say that I think the work here was really pretty solid. There's some good camera shots, good angles, good framing overall. My only complaint would be that the film is kind of dark, and if you get a low-end quality print of this, it's going to be a little pixelated because of that, and a little difficult to see. And unfortunately, Unfortunately, most copies of this are really low end. The best copy I've seen is a 2K transfer that was done on Blu-ray that is significantly better than my copy of it, which was in a 4-pack from Echo Bridge Home Entertainment. And it's serviceable, but it is rather dark and it's difficult to see on a bigger screen because it ends up being pixelated. But if you watch it on a large monitor, you should be okay. But overall, like I said, this is a pretty solid film, and it will be considered part of the slasher genre, but modern viewers of slasher films are going to expect a much higher body count, a much faster pace, and a lot less build-up and plot. And I thought they did a really good job establishing all the characters without being entirely boring. There is a little bit of a lull about halfway into the film, but that's when things start picking up. So I will recommend this if you can look at it as more of a psychological horror film. Because it is an early slasher and it deserves that respect that it helps set the trend quite a bit for future horror films. So if you get a chance to check this out, I do recommend it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and usually you can find it pretty cheap. The Blu-ray is probably going to be the most expensive version, but it is going to be the best way to see it. So that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.